Welcome everyone to another Pokemon Go video, and in this video we are going to be looking at the top 10 legacy movesets. And I understand this topic is very controversial, and legacy movesets should be available to everybody, and it does create an unfairness, but the reality is that they are available, and for the most part, even in this top 10 movesets, these legacy movesets can be worked around with other Pokemon in other movesets. So I've evaluated the quality of these legacy movesets based off the rarity and usefulness. The rarity is defined, in my opinion, by the length of availability. So did it become legacy very early on in the game? The Pokemon stage evolution. So what I mean by that is a Pokemon like Haunter, Foreshadow, another Foreshadow within that Foreshadow. Is a Pokemon where a lot of people would evolve it to Gengar as opposed to leaving it as Haunter. And then the popularity of a Pokemon. So a Pokemon like Charizard, a lot of people are going to keep a lot of Charizards because it is a fan favorite, which would reduce the rarity of that Pokemon. And then the usefulness of the Pokemon, mostly focusing on the use in the Silpharina Cups, including how meta it was. So there's some Pokemon that are eligible to be used in Silpharina Cups, but were not used very often because they were not meta or useful in that cup. And then the use in general Great League. The formula I'll be using includes rarity plus usefulness times 1.5. I'm giving additional weight to how useful the Pokemon was because some Pokemon are extremely rare but not that useful. Also, this excludes like common community day movesets or the ones available in raids. So what I mean that is a Pokemon like Frenzy Plant Venusaur would be rated very highly on this list, but you know it's rare still. But there are a lot of and as well these community day movesets moves are generally extremely good for PvP. So that's why I've also excluded them, or they were available in raids. So for example, likely number one before 3 months ago would have been Ice Shard, Ice Beam, Lapras, but since it became out in raids and the number of Ice Shard, Ice Beam, Laprases increased, those weren't included. And as well, some other potential ones that you might be thinking about that didn't make this list include like Stone Edge Blaziken. Stone Edge Blaziken probably would have made this list before the Community Day move. Blast Burn was added to its moveset, and Blaze Kick. So it certainly made Stone Edge. Stone Edge was useful because it would have did super effective damage to Altaria, but it also was lower energy requirement, which is super important for frail Pokemon like Blaziken. So you won't see Blaziken on this list, but let's get on to number 10. So number 10, we have Confusion on Exeggutor. And its rarity, I ranked it as 5. Exeggutor is a pretty, common and popular Pokemon, especially in some biomes, especially ones that had early sunny biome. And its usefulness, it's a 6. It was not quite meta in Rainbow, but certainly hit and beat a lot of the meta Pokemon like Venusaur, like potentially Quagsire without Sludge Bomb, and dealt like a lot of damage with this confusion damage. And it might see some play in jungle, but likely not too much. So Exeggutor with confusion, a really nice Pokemon to have. A bit frail, but that confusion damage is going to put a lot of hurt on Pokemon that aren't expecting Exeggutor to come. And to number 9, we have the big white gloved Poliwrath, water fighting Pokemon, Poliwrath. I rank this rarity as 3 because I do find that Poliwrath was a Pokemon, especially a lot of gameplay was revolved around early on around water biomes. So a lot of people would be evolving their Poliwags to Poliwrath, making Mud Shot more available than these other legacy movesets. In terms of usefulness, I actually found the usefulness quite high. It was available in Boulder, but likely not very many people used it. And then it was available in Nightmare and was arguably the second best fighting Pokemon, and oftentimes people brought 2 fighting Pokemon to their team composition, and Poliwrath was certainly the number 1 candidate for that second slot. It also found some use in some off-meta play in Rainbow, and then I find it's very good in general Great League, especially after it got Power Up Punch and Mud Shot plus Power Up Punch. After 4 Mud Shots, you get a Power Up Punch, and you can steamroll an entire team with Mud Shot Poliwrath. And number 8, this one is probably the one I disagree the most with after putting together these graphics, but we have Ominous Wind Golbat. The rarity I find is quite high. I personally have not been able to find one myself, and I put a couple feelers out there. If anyone's going to Dortmund or some future event, if you're watching this video in the future and you see me and you have one, I wouldn't mind. In terms of usefulness, I rate it as a 5. You could have used it in Twilight. It saw some potential play in season 1 regionals because its ability to do pretty well against like Medicham, for example, and a couple other Pokemon, but its play was quite limited, so maybe it's not as useful as 5. And if I were to re-rank this one, I'd probably rank it a little bit lower, but still, Ominous Wind allows you to get off a really low energy Ghost move, and paired up with its movesets allows it to be even more useful, especially when it comes to Burning Shields. And at number 7, we have Venomoth with Poison Fang. In terms of rarity, I rank it as a 4. I find that Venonats were pretty common in Gen 1. A lot of people had them, and I find that there's enough of them. Not that any of these, when I say the rarity is low, it's more common than these other Pokemon. Doesn't mean that it's super easy to find. In terms of usefulness, I actually find its usefulness quite high. Once Confusion was buffed, before, basically at the start, right after the start of Twilight, it became the number 1 Toxicroak killer, and Toxicroak was the meta-defining Pokemon in the Twilight Cup, and it absolutely wrecked it. And with Poison Fang, allowed it to stand toe-to-toe with the almighty, all-tanky Azumarill. It also found some really useful slight off-meta play in Rainbow, and it's going to see some really relevant play in Jungle. So quite a great Pokemon. With that Confusion damage, allows you to get off an early charge move with that Poison Fang, and with the huge hitting potential boost Silver Wind, it makes Venomoth a really nice, well-rounded Pokemon. In number 6, we have the ever so popular, the evolved form of the most popular Pokemon, arguably the most popular Pokemon. We have Raichu with Thundershock. I find the rarity of this Pokemon to be about a 5. A lot of people evolved their Sandshrew, Pikachus into Raichu early on in the meta, so it became available. And then as well, its usefulness is quite high. It found some wasn't super common in Tempest, but it's found some really nice gameplay in Rainbow and especially in Jungle. So I expect it to be one of the most common Pokemon and one of the most common electric types to be used in Jungle and in going forward. And that Thundershock allows it to get to Brick Break or Thunder Punch or Wild Charge for that nuke damage really quickly. And you can see the difference with Thundershock, especially with that nice energy chemistry it has. And at number 5, we have Last Resort Umbreon. And some of you might say, well, Last Resort was a community move, but not that many people evolved Umbreon at night during the Saturday night or pre-walked it, for example. In order to get Last Resort Umbreon. It is one of the most coveted and useful legacy Pokemon, and that Last Resort allows it to hit other dark Pokemon with neutral damage, and allows it to hit other Pokemon that would normally resist dark moves, like Azumarill, with some neutral damage and inflict quite a bit of damage to it. So a really nice Pokemon. So its rarity is pretty high because not that many people pre-walked Umbreon, because before PvP we didn't think Last Resort was going to be great. At least myself, I didn't think it would be that great. And its usefulness, it's found some really great gameplay in regionals. In Nightmare, it was one of the most common and useful Pokemon in Nightmare, especially as the meta started developing. It found some really nice use in Season 1 championships, and it's really useful in general Great League and pairs with a lot of the top tier Pokemon like Defense Deoxys, for example. And at number 4, we have Lapras with Dragon Pulse. So I said earlier that Ice Shard, Ice Beam, Lapras was not that useful, or was not that rare anymore because it was in raids. It's actually extremely useful, but with its lack of rarity, it didn't make it on this list. But Dragon Pulse is quite a rare moveset, especially since when raids were released. Dragon Pulse, you might have had a Dragon Pulse Lapras. Lapras was extremely rare back in Gen 1, and pretty rare even now. And to find a Dragon Pulse one that was under 1500, because it gets to a decent level, and lots of people like to put it in gyms, and so they've powered up their Lapras, was pretty rare, and it's actually a very rare Pokemon to find. So if you have one, and you find me around, or you have some PvP friends that you really like, gifting them or using one in your Silver Arena Cups would be amazing. So it found some really nice play in Tempest, Kingdom, and Rainbow. It's really nice because with Dragon Pulse, it allows you to win the mirror match, and also allows you to win some matchups that you would normally lose against. So that Dragon Pulse allows you to hit with some nice neutral damage especially against Pokemon that single or double resist the Surf and Ice Beam. So Dragon Pulse will allow you to win the mirror match, and allow it to maintain that switch advantage and come out on top against opposing Laprases. And tied for second, we have the three-headed monster, or three-eyed monster, however you want to define it, Magneton with Thundershock and Discharge. And shock or spark is pretty useful as well, but Thundershock and Discharge allows you to have perfect energy chemistry. What I mean by that is each Thundershock gives you 9 energy. Each Discharge requires 45 energy. So after 5 Thundershocks, allows you to have a full Discharge with no wasted energy, and paired with Magna Bomb allows you to have one of the spammiest Pokemon in the game. And this Pokemon, I find it's still pretty rare, and its rarity is increased because of the fact that it has 2 legacy movesets. It found some play in Boulder, especially with all those Skarmories flying around, some play in Tempest, some play in Rainbow, but I think it's going to find some really nice niche play in Jungle, especially with all its resistances, and it's used in general Great League as well. And the other Pokemon that it's tied with is the hypnotic Pokemon Hypno with Shadow Ball. Some people would argue around Psyshock, but the fact that Confusion does so much damage is the fact that the reason why Psyshock has not found as much useful play. But that Shadow Ball damage is going to do a lot of damage. It was one of the meta-defining Pokemon in Nightmare. It saw a lot of great gameplay in Season 1 Championship, especially as a potential Azumarill alternative, according to PvPoke. But even then, it was able to do a lot of damage, and with its bulkiness, its confusion, and its Shadow Ball allowed it to nuke a lot of Pokemon. And then as well, it's really great in general Great League. And the rarity is 7. Some people could argue that it's a little lower, but I find it's a pretty tough Pokemon to come around, and it's certainly not necessarily a fan favorite, so a lot of people wouldn't have kept it around. And the number 1 Pokemon, if you were paying attention to the beginning of the video, I would have foreshadowed it. It's maybe haunting in your brains, and we are talking about the number 1 legacy moveset is Shadow Ball on Haunter. In terms of rarity, it's extremely rare. It's very rare because it's a second stage Pokemon. It's a very difficult Pokemon to find. And then as well, it saw some really great gameplay in regionals, thanks to Valor Ash and some other people that made it really useful or made it really popular, like Guan87 in Toronto. Shout out to those two and everyone else that makes Shadow Ball and Haunter really viable. And Shadow Ball Haunter itself is the definition of a glass cannon, and it's very frail, but with the combination of Shadow Claw getting a buff early on and allow it to generate energy even quicker, and Shadow Ball being one of the best charge moves outside of the Community Day moves in PvP, allows it to just absolutely destroy Pokemon. And I've heard many people quote that there is no better feeling than landing a Shadow Ball on an unshielded opponent with Haunter and seeing absolutely how much damage it does. It can virtually one-shot a Skarmory, virtually one-shot a Sableye, one of its main counters, and a lot of different Pokemon. So I found some really nice gameplay in regionals, made popular by those individuals, and some nice gameplay in Season 1 Championship, and it's one of the most common Pokemon in General Great League and in drafts. So in summary, the top 10 Legacy Pokemon, I don't know why Legacy's coming over top of Lapras, but regardless, is Haunter, Magneton and Hypno, Tide, Dragon Pulse, Lapras, Last Resort, Umbreon, Thundershock, Raichu, Poison Fang, Venomoth, Ominous Wind, Golbat, Mud Shot, Poliwrath, and Confusion, Exeggutor. So, if you guys like this video, give you a thumbs up. Let me know in the comment section below if you agree, disagree, what Pokemon did I miss. There's lots of other potential Pokemon that could have made this list and that were considered: Flamethrower, Ninetales, Earthquake, Politoed, a bunch of other legacy Pokemon, Bugbite, Beedrill, Bugbite, Venomoth, lots of them that could have made this list. So let me know in the comments section below what I missed, and if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see everyone in the next video.